Okay, so in this slide, we create a portfolio that's 40% invested in the stock fund, 60% in the bond fund. So what we do is we're going to calculate rates of return in each for each outcome. So all you do for each of these returns is you're going to multiply 0.4 by the stock return in that scenario, plus 0.6 times the bond return in that scenario. So, for example, we've got negative 20 here. Negative 20 is 0.4 times the 37% loss plus 0.6 times the 9% loss in the bond fund. You add those two together and you get the negative 20.2. Then we multiply that by the probability of that return, and we do this for each scenario again, and we sum those numbers up and we get the expected return on our portfolio. We can also calculate the expected return on our portfolio by multiplying 0.4 times the expected return on the stock fund of 10%, adding that to 0.6 times the expected return on the bond fund of 5%. So 0.4 times 10 is 4, 0.6 times 5 is 3, so 4 plus 3 is 7. So then we calculate our deviation from expected return. So minus 20 minus 7, that's minus 27.2. 4.6 minus 7 is minus 2.4. 10.4 minus 7 is 3.4. 9.0 minus 7 is 2. So we square these and we get our square deviation. We multiply those by each of the probabilities and sum those up, and we get the variance of 44.26. And then we take the square root of that variance and come up with the standard deviation for our combined portfolio. So we can create a portfolio with a 7% expected return with actually a lower standard deviation than either of the separate portfolios. This is an example of diversification. So we were on the wrong direction. So we had to, if you recall, we had a standard deviation on the bond fund of 8.27%, and then a standard deviation on the stock fund of 18.63%. We've created a portfolio with a higher rate of return than the bond fund with a lower standard deviation. So we could see showing the benefits of diversification here. So next page will give us an idea of why we were able to achieve this with this combined portfolio. So we're going to calculate the covariance and the correlation coefficient for each of these. So the covariance is simply the sum of the deviation from return, the deviation returns for each the stock fund and the bond fund. So we actually calculated these before, but so for this is the 37% loss minus the expected return of 10%. This is the 9% loss minus the expected return of 5%, and so on down the line. We multiply those together and multiply them by the probability, and we get this. So 0.05 times negative 47 times negative 14, 0.25 times negative 21 times 10, and get 210. So one thing you'll note here is that we end up with negatives and positives. This is important for covariance. Negative covariance tells us that these two funds move in opposite directions. So After we multiply the probabilities, we add those up and we get a covariance of negative 74.8. And then we calculate the correlation coefficient, which is simply the covariance divided by the two standard deviations multiplied together, and we get negative 0.49. So this is the reason we're able to reduce the standard deviation by combining the two portfolios.